I'm Shanker Singham, Director of the International Trade and Competition Unit at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and you're watching Reason. 2 billion of the world's people live in conditions of abject poverty on less than $2 a day. And the question is, how can we lift people out of poverty? The international trading system, the GATT system, has lifted billions of people out of poverty since 1947, since the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs and the systematic reduction of trade barriers around the world, of border trade barriers and reduction of tariffs. That has led to the creation of the transnational company. That has led to conditions where countries like China can accede to the WTO and lift literally hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in those countries. It's led to conditions where India can lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty through its economic reform program. But we obviously haven't finished the job of lifting people out of poverty. We've barely scratched the surface, actually, in terms of doing it. And the question is, how can we do it? Well, there are three fundamental laws of wealth creation. Wealth creation is the critical way of increasing the size of the economic pie and therefore lifting people out of poverty. And those three laws are, first of all, that wealth can be created or destroyed. Many people think that wealth is a zero-sum game, that if I gain something, you lose something. Well, wealth creation and human interactions are, in fact, non-zero-sum in nature. So wealth can be created, it can be destroyed. It's much easier to destroy wealth than it is to create it. Governments, through laws and regulations, regularly destroy huge amounts of wealth from their economies. And the force of competition, the third law is the force of competition, is the most powerful force in creating wealth and therefore lifting people out of poverty. We need to understand what competition means. Competition is basically what happens when you allow people to meet each other's needs in voluntary exchange, without barriers, without regulatory interventions and so forth. International trade, which is so critical to wealth creation, is just a subset of competition. It's competition which occurs across borders. So in what ways can governments act to damage competition? Well, we want to see policies that improve the competitive marketplace, that improve the process of competition, certainly don't get in the way of the process of competition. And we judge that competition standard. It's not just about having lots of competitors. It's about ensuring that competition is as least distorted as possible, that competition occurs by allowing companies to freely compete. Now, that's judged by a standard of consumer welfare enhancement, and it depends on the impact of those transactions on consumers. Policymakers very often focus only on producers and producer interests, but competition is all about consumers. It's all about how benefits can be secured for consumers, either in terms of lower prices, more capacity, more choice, and more innovation. Innovation occurs when companies are actually competing. So there are three things that governments and policymakers need to focus on to lift people out of poverty. One is trade liberalization, which, as I said, was a subset of competition. The other is competition on the merits in your ordinary economic policy. And the third is property rights protection. Property rights protection is incredibly important because property rights are what firms actually compete with. So if you get those three things right, then you can actually lift enormous numbers of people out of poverty. And we can see some of those 2 billion people currently living on $2 a day lifted out of poverty. And that will flow up through the whole economic system.